A pregnant wife gasps for air as her husband strangles her with his own tie, and her mother opens the door the exact moment his body is hanging from the ceiling. The scream that echoes through the house changes everything, and reveals the monster who was living there all along. If you love stories like this, watch till the end, subscribe to this channel, and drop a comment letting us know where you're listening from. The morning arrived, humid and heavy in New Orleans, carrying that oppressive Louisiana heat that seemed to wrap around everything like a suffocating embrace. Megan woke up with the feeling that something was different, though she couldn't explain exactly what. Maybe it was just the 7th month of pregnancy weighing on her movements, turning every simple gesture into a calculated effort. Or maybe it was the way Ryan had slipped out of bed before dawn, avoiding her gaze, whispering only that he had an important meeting and would be back before dinner. She lay there, on the still warm mattress on his side of the bed, listening to the sound of the faucet in the bathroom, the creak of the closet, the hurried footsteps down the stairs. The front door clicked shut, and the silence that followed seemed louder than any noise. Megan pushed herself up with difficulty, her hands on her lower back as her bare feet touched the cool hardwood floor. The room was bathed in a greyish gloom, the thick curtains blocking most of the morning light. She walked to the window and yanked them open, letting the sun flood the space. Outside, the quiet street of their upscale neighborhood was beginning to stir. Neighbors were walking their dogs, kids were waiting for the school bus, and everything seemed absurdly normal. Too normal, considering the turmoil that had been churning in her chest for weeks. Ryan was distant. It wasn't a physical distance, but something worse, something that created an invisible chasm between them even when they were in the same room. Conversations that once flowed naturally were now replaced with monosyllabic answers and evasive glances. He was compulsively scrolling on his phone, angling the screen away whenever she got close, and spending hours locked in his office with the excuse of a work backlog. The baby moved inside her, a sharp kick against her ribs that made her gasp. Megan placed a hand on her prominent belly, feeling the life growing there, and a wave of tenderness mixed with anxiety washed over her. It was a girl. They had already chosen the name together during one of the last nights when Ryan still seemed present. Julia. The name had been his suggestion, and his eyes had lit up in a way Megan hadn't seen in a long time. But after that night, something had shifted again. It was as if a door had closed inside him, locking her out. She tried to ask what was wrong, tried to start deep conversations over dinner, or before bed, but Ryan skillfully dodged any emotional confrontation. "Everything's fine, babe," he'd say, "just stressed with work." But Megan knew her husband. She knew every micro-expression, every tone of voice, and she knew when she was being lied to. She went down to the kitchen, still in her nightgown, and made coffee, even though she knew she should avoid caffeine. The house was too big for 2 people, and soon it would be too big for 3. Ryan had insisted on buying this property 2 years ago when his business started to take off. Megan had argued it was too much space, too much upkeep, but he was adamant. "We need room to grow," he'd said, smiling in that way that melted all her resistance. And she had given in, as she always did. Now, as she wandered through the empty rooms, Megan wondered if all that space wasn't actually a way to keep his distance. The more space, the less proximity required. The more rooms, the more places to hide. The phone rang, cutting through the morning silence like a knife. Megan answered without checking the caller ID, expecting it to be Ryan with another excuse for coming home even later. But the voice on the other end was female, familiar, and laced with an urgency that made Megan's heart race. "Honey, I need to talk to you," said Teresa, her mother, in a tone Megan immediately recognized as a harbinger of trouble. "Not over the phone. Can I come over now?" Megan hesitated, glancing at the wall clock. It was only 7:30 in the morning. Her mother rarely visited this early, and never without calling ahead. "What happened, Mom?" Megan tried to keep her voice calm, but anxiety was already seeping into every word. "Nothing serious," Teresa answered too quickly, obviously lying. "I just need to talk in person. I'll be there in 20 minutes. And she hung up before Megan could argue. 20 minutes. Megan rushed upstairs, ignoring the ache in her back and the pressure on her bladder that pregnancy made constant. She changed quickly, choosing a loose dress that accommodated her transformed body and tied her brown hair into a messy bun. She looked in the mirror and saw the signs of insomnia in her eyes, the dark circles that no amount of makeup could completely conceal anymore. She was exhausted. Exhausted from carrying a life inside her, while also carrying the weight of a marriage that seemed to be silently falling apart. Exhausted from pretending everything was fine, when every fiber of her being screamed that something was terribly wrong. The doorbell rang exactly 19 minutes later. Teresa was at the door, and Megan's stomach clenched at the expression on her mother's face. It was a mix of determination and something that looked a lot like fear. Teresa walked in without waiting for a formal invitation, carrying a large tote bag that she placed on the living room coffee table with a thud that suggested more than just everyday items. The two women stared at each other for a tense moment, and then Teresa pulled her daughter into a tight, almost desperate hug. Megan felt tears burn her eyes, confused by the intensity of the affection. "Mom, you're scaring me," she whispered against Teresa's shoulder. "What's going on?" Teresa pulled away, holding her daughter's shoulders firmly, looking deep into her eyes as if searching for courage in their connection. "Sit down, honey, please." The tone was soft but authoritative, the way Teresa always managed to be. Megan obeyed, settling onto the sofa, with her hand instinctively protecting her belly. Teresa sat beside her, taking several deep breaths before speaking, and when she finally began, the words came out in a rushed, urgent tumble. "Megan, I found out something about Ryan. Something you need to know before it's too late." Megan's world tilted slightly on its axis. She felt the blood drain from her face, her hands turn cold, and a wave of nausea rise in her throat. Before she could ask, Teresa continued, her voice thick with emotion. "I didn't want to believe it when I was told. I spent the last 3 days checking, investigating, because I had to be sure before I came to you. And now I am." Megan opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her brain tried to process the words, but they seemed to be coming from far away, distorted and unreal. Ryan. Her Ryan. The man she'd been married to for 4 years, the father of the baby growing inside her. Teresa pulled a folder from her large bag, opening it with trembling hands. Inside were papers, documents she began to spread across the coffee table. Megan recognized some of them, photos, statements, but she couldn't focus on the details. Her vision was blurry, and her heart was pounding so hard it drowned out every other sound. "He's hiding something from you," Teresa said, pointing to the papers. "Something very serious. And it has to do with his past, with things he never told you." His past. Megan knew Ryan had been private about certain aspects of his life before they met. He'd mentioned a difficult childhood, absent parents, but always changed the subject when she tried to dig deeper. She had respected that space, assuming he would open up when he was ready. But now, looking at her mother's tense face and that pile of mysterious documents, Megan realized she might have been far too naive. "What kind of secrets, Mom?" Her voice came out hoarse, almost unrecognizable. Teresa picked up a specific photograph, hesitated for an eternal second, and then placed it in Megan's hands. It was an old, faded photo of a young man and woman holding a baby. Megan looked closer, frowning. "Who are these people? Why are you showing me this?" Teresa took a deep breath, and when she spoke, each word fell like a stone into a still lake, creating ripples that expanded infinitely. "That baby is Ryan, or at least the child who became Ryan, but his name wasn't Ryan Scott when he was born." Megan felt the floor drop out from under her. She kept staring at the photo, trying to find some familiar feature in that chubby, wide-eyed baby. "What are you saying?" Teresa moved closer, placing her hand over her daughter's. "I'm saying your husband changed his identity 15 years ago. He completely erased the trail of who he was before. And I found out why. The reason is going to shatter everything you think you know about him." The clock on the wall read 8 in the morning, but for Megan, time had stopped completely. She looked at the photo again, then at the other scattered documents, and finally at her mother's determined face. A part of her wanted to scream, to demand that Teresa stop talking, to put those papers away and leave her house, taking all these disturbing revelations with her. Another part, the rational part that always tried to prevail, knew she had to listen. She had to know the truth, no matter how painful it was. "Tell me everything," she whispered, holding her mother's hand like an anchor in the storm that was about to break over her life. "I need to know everything." And Teresa began to speak, unraveling a story that seemed straight out of an unbelievable soap opera. But with every document presented, every detail revealed, it became terrifyingly real. Ryan was not who he said he was. His real name was different, his history was different, and the reasons for hiding it all had ramifications that touched not only their present, but also the future of the child Megan was carrying. As she listened, Megan felt her carefully constructed world begin to crack at its foundations, each revelation opening deeper fissures in the reality she thought she knew. And the worst was yet to come, because what Teresa was about to reveal would change not only how Megan saw Ryan, but also how she saw herself and her own entire history. The hours passed without Megan noticing. The sun climbed higher in the sky, pouring light through the living room window, but she remained on that sofa, frozen in a state of shock that oscillated between disbelief and a painful growing understanding. Teresa spared no details, showing every piece of evidence she had collected, explaining every connection she had made. There were names Megan had never heard, places Ryan had never spoken of, and a web of circumstances that painted a completely different picture of the man she thought she knew so well. "How did you find all this out?" Megan finally asked, her voice weak and broken. Teresa sighed, running a hand through her graying hair. "It was by chance, at first. A casual conversation with an old acquaintance who mentioned seeing someone who looked a lot like Ryan in a strange situation years ago. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I started putting the pieces together. I hired someone to investigate discreetly, and what they found kept me up at night." Megan stood up abruptly, needing to move, needing to do something with the nervous energy that threatened to make her explode. She walked to the window, staring out at the street without really seeing anything. The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if sensing its mother's emotional turmoil. Julia, her daughter. What did all this mean for her? For their future? "And does Ryan know I was going to find out?" Megan asked without turning around. "Is he running from me now?" Teresa came to stand beside her daughter. "I don't know, sweetie, but the fact that he's been so distant lately, so secretive, suggests he might be dealing with something big. Maybe he also found out that you're close to knowing the truth, or maybe, and this is the part that worries me most, he's planning something." Planning something. The words echoed ominously in Megan's mind. Ryan had always been a meticulous planner. It was one of the qualities she admired in him, the way he thought. 3 steps ahead. How he never left anything to chance. But now that trait took on a different, almost threatening tone. If he had hidden an entire identity, if he had built a life based on lies, how far would he go to protect those secrets? Megan felt a chill run down her spine despite the suffocating Louisiana heat. She looked down at her belly, at the physical proof of the love she thought she shared with Ryan, and wondered if all of this was also part of a larger plan she couldn't see. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway made both women freeze. Megan recognized the rumble of the engine, the specific way Ryan maneuvered to park. He was back, much earlier than he had promised. Teresa immediately began gathering the scattered papers, stuffing everything back into the folder with hurried movements. "Don't let him know you know," she whispered urgently. "Not yet. We need more time to decide what to do with this information." Megan nodded, her heart racing, trying to rearrange her facial expression into something that looked normal. But how could she feign normalcy when the ground beneath her feet had turned to quicksand? The front door opened. Familiar footsteps echoed down the hall, and then Ryan appeared in the living room doorway. He stopped upon seeing Teresa, genuine surprise crossing his face before it was quickly replaced by a polite smile. "Teresa, what a surprise," he said, but there was something in his voice, an almost imperceptible tension. "I didn't know you were coming today." Teresa smiled back, and Megan had to admire her mother's ability to seem completely at ease. "Surprise visit, Ryan. You know how it is, a worried mother checking on her pregnant daughter. Just stopped by to see how she's doing. Ryan nodded, but his eyes darted around the room, noticing the folder Teresa was clutching. The way Megan was far too pale. "Is everything okay?" he asked, directing the question specifically to Megan, and there was something in his gaze, an unasked question, maybe even a warning. "Everything's great," Megan forced the words out, sounding sharper than she intended. "Just talking about baby stuff. You know, preparations." The silence that followed was thick, heavy with unspoken meanings and invisible tensions. Ryan remained standing in the doorway, and Megan realized he was purposefully blocking the exit. It was a subtle gesture, probably unconscious but revealing. Teresa noticed it too, and Megan saw determination harden her mother's features. "Well, I was just leaving anyway," Teresa said, grabbing her purse and walking toward Ryan with firm steps. "Take good care of my daughter, Ryan. She's all I have in this world." And as she passed him, she added in a lower tone, but loud enough for Megan to hear, "And I hope you know that secrets always come out, sooner or later." Ryan stood motionless, but Megan saw his jaw clench, the muscles in his neck tighten. He didn't reply, just stepped aside to let Teresa pass, and seconds later the front door closed, leaving husband and wife alone in the sun-drenched living room. The silence between them was almost palpable. Megan couldn't look directly at Ryan, afraid he would read in her eyes all the accusations and questions now burning in her mind. Ryan took a step toward her. "Megan, we need to talk." The way he said it, serious and definitive, made her heart skip a beat. "About what?" she asked, still avoiding his gaze, pretending to adjust a cushion on the sofa. "About us," he replied. "About everything." Megan finally turned to face Ryan, forcing herself to maintain her composure, even as every instinct screamed for her to confront him with all the lies she now knew. He looked different in the harsh morning light, or maybe she was just seeing him with new eyes. The features that once seemed familiar and comforting now carried shadows of mystery, each expression a potential mask, hiding unrevealed truths. Ryan moved closer, and she had to stop herself from flinching. He reached out, touching her arm gently, and that simple gesture that once would have calmed her now sent waves of confusion through her body. "You're pale," he observed, the concern in his voice genuine. "Are you feeling okay? Is the baby okay?" The mention of the baby nearly broke Megan's facade. She instinctively placed a hand over her belly, feeling little Julia move as if responding to her father's presence. "We're fine," she answered, each word carefully measured. "It's just the heat, and I'm tired." Ryan nodded, but he continued to study her face as if searching for something specific, some sign that she knew more than she was letting on. "Did the meeting end early?" Megan asked, trying to sound casual as she moved away from him, walking toward the kitchen. "I need some water." Ryan followed her, and Megan could feel the weight of his gaze on her back. "It was cancelled," he said after a pause that lasted a second too long. "The client had an emergency. We decided to reschedule." Megan opened the refrigerator, grabbing a bottle of water with hands that trembled slightly. When she turned, Ryan was leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed over his chest, and that defensive posture was new. Or maybe it wasn't new and she had just never paid enough attention. "Your mom seemed tense," he commented, and there was something in the way he said it, a gentle but persistent probing. "Did you two argue?" Megan took a long sip of water, buying time. "No, not at all. She's just worried about the pregnancy. You know how mums are." Ryan didn't look convinced, but he let the subject drop, and the silence that settled between them was too thick to ignore. It was so different from how things used to be, when silences were comfortable, filled with the intimacy of two people who didn't need words to understand each other. "Megan," Ryan began, straightening up and taking a step toward her. His voice had changed, taking on a serious tone she rarely heard. "I need to tell you some things. Things I should have told you a long time ago." Megan's heart raced. This was it. He was going to confess. All of Teresa's investigation, all those documents and revelations, and now Ryan was about to hand it all over voluntarily. She braced herself, gripping the water bottle so tightly her knuckles turned white. "What things?" she asked, keeping her voice as neutral as possible. Ryan ran, a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture Megan knew well. "About my past, about who I was before we met. There are things I've hidden from you, and it wasn't fair. You deserve to know the truth." But before he could continue, his phone rang, cutting the moment like a blade. Ryan glanced at the screen, and Megan saw the color drain from his face. He answered quickly, turning his back to her. "Hello?" His voice was tense. "Yes, this is he." A long pause during which Megan only heard the muffled murmur of a male voice on the other end. "No, now is not a good time." Another pause. "I understand. Yes, I'll handle it." He hung up and stood for a moment, his back to Megan, his shoulders visibly tense. When he finally turned around, the expression on his face was that of someone who had just received terrible news. "Sorry, babe, I have to go out again. It's urgent." "Urgent," Megan repeated, and she couldn't keep the accusatory tone out of her voice. "Everything is always urgent lately, Ryan. You were about to tell me something important, remember?" Ryan moved toward her, taking her hands with an almost desperate intensity. "I know and I will, I promise. But this can't wait. It's about work, about things that could really complicate our situation if I don't deal with it now." Megan looked at the hands holding hers, hands she knew so well, that had touched every part of her body with tenderness and passion, and she wondered how many other things these hands had done that she knew nothing about. "When, Ryan? When exactly are you going to stop running and be honest with me?" The question hit him like a punch. She could see it in the way he flinched slightly. "I'm not running," he said, but the defense sounded weak even to his own ears. "I'm trying to protect you, to protect us. You don't understand the complexity of the situation." "Then explain it to me," Megan retorted, feeling anger finally start to bubble up through the confusion and pain. "Make me understand, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're hiding something terrible, and my imagination is creating scenarios far worse than any truth could be." Ryan opened his mouth as if to answer, then closed it again, and Megan saw the decision form in his eyes. He was going to leave. He was going to postpone again. "I'll be back tonight," he said, letting go of her hands and stepping away. "And then we'll talk properly. No interruptions. I promise." Megan watched him grab his keys from the table, adjust his shirt and walk toward the door with determined but hurried steps. At the door he stopped and looked back, and for a moment Megan saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. Fear. Ryan was afraid. "I love you, Megan," he said, and there was an urgency in those words that made them sound almost like an apology. "Whatever happens, whatever you find out, remember that. I have always truly loved you." And before she could respond, he was gone, the door closing behind him with a finality that seemed to echo through the empty house. Megan stood in the middle of the kitchen, processing that strange farewell. Whatever you find out. So he knew, or at least suspected she was close to the truth. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and when she looked, she saw a text from Teresa. "Did he leave? Can we talk more?" Megan replied quickly, "Yes, come back. I need to know everything now. I can't wait anymore." While she waited for her mother to return, Megan went up to the room they had turned into a nursery. The walls were painted a soft yellow, decorated with delicate drawings of butterflies and flowers. The light wood crib was assembled in a corner, already fitted with baby sheets, waiting for little Julia, who would arrive in 2 months. Megan sat in the nursing chair, running her hands over the carved wooden arms, a piece Ryan had chosen himself and assembled with his own hands, on one of the last weekends when they still seemed like a normal couple. Everything in that room represented hope, a future they had planned together, conversations about what it would be like to raise a daughter, about the values they wanted to instill, about the kind of family they would be. But now that future seemed hazy, uncertain, built on foundations that may have never been solid to begin with. Megan closed her eyes, trying to organize the chaotic thoughts swirling in her mind. Ryan was not who he said he was. He had another name, another life before her. Why would someone completely change their identity? The reasons that came to mind were all worrying. Witness protection, running from something or someone, starting over after something terrible. But Ryan had always seemed so normal, so stable. He had built a successful business, had friends, a solid reputation in the community. The doorbell rang and Megan went down quickly, opening the door to find Teresa with a determined expression. "Let's finish this conversation," her mother said, walking straight into the living room and opening the folder with all the documents again. Megan sat beside her, this time ready to hear everything without interruption. Teresa pulled out a birth certificate, yellowed with age. "This is his original birth record," she began. "His real name is Michael Turner, born in Houston, Texas, in 1988. Megan took the document with trembling hands. Michael Turner. The name sounded strange, as if it belonged to a completely different person from the man she knew. "Go on, Mom." Teresa took a deep breath. Michael grew up in an orphanage until he was 12. Then he was adopted by an upper-middle-class family here in New Orleans. Adopted. That would explain why Ryan never talked about his parents, why he always deflected when she asked about family. But why hide it? Adoption wasn't something to be ashamed of. Teresa seemed to read her daughter's thoughts. "The adoption itself isn't the problem, Megan. The problem is what happened after." She pulled out another document, this one some kind of report. The family that adopted Michael, the Turners, were influential people. They owned an export company. But 4 years after the adoption, there was a financial scandal involving the company. Investigations, accusations of fraud. Michael was 16 when it all fell apart. The family lost everything, their reputation, their money, and the adoptive parents separated amidst the chaos. Michael was left lost in the middle of it all. Megan listened, fascinated and horrified at the same time. So he changed his name to escape the family's scandal? To start over without carrying that weight? Teresa nodded slowly. "Partly, yes, but there's more. When Michael was 18, right after he managed to legally change his identity to Ryan Scott, he simply disappeared from New Orleans for 5 years. There are no records of him anywhere during that period. No formal employment, no registered address. It's like he vanished off the face of the earth. And then at 23, he reappears with a college degree from a private university in Chicago, a flawless resume, and starts building the business he has today. All very convenient, all very clean. But that 5-year gap really bothers me, Megan. 5 years. Where does someone go for 5 years without leaving a trace?" Megan felt a chill run down her spine. "Do you think he was involved in something illegal?" Teresa hesitated before answering. "I don't know for sure. My investigator couldn't find anything concrete about that period. But there are rumors, old gossip from people who knew Michael back then. They say he got involved with the wrong crowd, that he might have participated in schemes to make quick money. Nothing confirmed, all very vague, but enough to raise suspicion." Megan stood up again, unable to sit still, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "So my husband might have a criminal past, and I knew nothing?" Teresa stood up too, holding her daughter's arms. "Calm down, Megan. I'm not saying he's a criminal. I'm saying he hid significant parts of his life from you, and we need to understand why. There could be perfectly reasonable explanations. Maybe he worked off the books, traveled, went through a difficult emotional period, but the fact that he never mentioned any of it, that he constructed a completely different narrative about who he is, that's what's worrying." Megan shook her head, trying to process it all. "And his adoptive parents? Where are they now?" Teresa consulted her notes. "The adoptive mother passed away years ago. The father is still alive, lives in a modest house on the outskirts of Houston. My investigator tried to contact him, but he refused to talk about Michael, just said he doesn't have a son. Any more that Michael chose to cut all ties when he changed his name." The story grew more complex and painful with each revelation. Megan tried to imagine Ryan, or Michael, as a teenager traumatized by the collapse of his adoptive family, desperate to reinvent himself, to escape a past that haunted him. There was compassion in that image, a humanity that made it all more understandable. But there was also betrayal, the betrayal of building a marriage, of bringing a child into the world, all based on lies and omissions. "Is there anything else?" Megan asked, almost afraid of the answer. Teresa bit her lip, clearly debating whether to continue. "There is," she finally admitted, "and this is what worries me the most." She pulled one last photo from the folder, this one more recent. "It's a picture my investigator took 3 days ago. Ryan is in it, leaving a building in downtown New Orleans. Do you recognize the place?" Megan took the photo, studying it carefully. It was definitely Ryan, dressed casually, looking over his shoulder as if checking if he was being followed. The building behind him was old, in need of renovation, definitely not the kind of place where his business operated. "No, I've never seen that building. What is it?" Teresa hesitated again before answering. "It's a law firm specializing in identity and documentation issues, the kind of place people go when they have legal problems related to their records, when they need to correct information, or when they're trying to protect their identity." The investigator spoke to the receptionist, pretending to be a client. He found out that Ryan has been there several times in the last few weeks, always requesting private meetings with the senior partner. Megan's stomach churned. Why would Ryan need a lawyer specializing in identity now after all these years? Unless something had changed, unless some threat from the past had resurfaced, or an even more disturbing thought, unless he was planning to disappear again. Megan placed a hand on her belly, feeling Julia move, and a wave of panic engulfed her. Is he planning to leave us? To run away again? Teresa hugged her daughter quickly. We don't know that. It could be something completely different. Maybe he's finally decided to resolve pending issues from his past. Maybe he's trying to fully legalize his new identity to protect you and the baby. We can't jump to conclusions. But the conclusions were already forming in Megan's mind, each one more frightening than the last. She pulled away from her mother's embrace, walking to the window and looking at the street where Ryan's car had been parked just minutes ago. Where had he gone in such a hurry? Who was the person on the phone who made him leave so abruptly? And more importantly, when he returned that night as promised, what truth exactly did he intend to tell? Would it be the whole truth or just carefully selected fragments to keep? Her calm without revealing everything? The day passed in a haze of anxiety and speculation. Teresa stayed with Megan until mid-afternoon, and together they reviewed every document, every photo, every piece of information they had collected. They created a timeline on the wall of the study, connecting events, trying to fill the gaps in Ryan's story with educated guesses. But the more they tried, the more questions arose. Around 4 o'clock, Teresa had to leave, promising to come back the next day or call if Megan needed anything. Before she left, she held her daughter's face in her hands. Whatever. The truth is, Megan, remember that you're not alone. You have me. You have your strength. And you have that little one inside you who needs a strong mother. Don't let his secrets destroy who you are. Alone in the quiet house, Megan went up to her room and lay on the bed, physically and emotionally exhausted. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the walls, and she watched the patterns of light gradually change. She picked up her phone and opened the photo gallery, scrolling through images of happy moments with Ryan. Their wedding 4 years ago, a simple but beautiful ceremony at a lodge on the bayou. Their honeymoon in Key West, where they spent days swimming in crystal-clear waters and nights making love under a starry sky. The photo of the positive pregnancy test, their faces radiant with joy and surprise. Each image now seemed laden with irony, with unasked questions. Who was that man smiling beside her in these photos? Michael or Ryan? Or some third version she didn't even know yet? When the clock struck 9 p.m. and Ryan still hadn't returned, Megan started calling his cell. At first it rang once before, going to voicemail. Then it went straight to voicemail as if the phone was turned off. She sent texts. Where are you? I'm worried. We need to talk. No response. 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. The anxiety Megan had managed to keep under control during the day now exploded into full-blown panic. She paced through the house, turning on all the lights, checking windows and doors, her heart racing. Something was very wrong. Ryan had promised to come back, promised to finally tell the truth. Men like him didn't break promises without a serious reason. At midnight, Megan called Teresa, her voice breaking. "Mom, he's not back and he's not answering his phone. I don't know what to do." Teresa tried to calm her, suggesting maybe he had car trouble or got stuck in a work emergency with a dead phone battery, but even she didn't sound convinced by her own explanations. 1 in the morning. Megan was sitting in the dark living room, only the streetlight filtering through the window, when she heard a car approach. She ran to the window, her heart leaping with hope. But it wasn't Ryan's car, it was a taxi, and when it stopped in front of the house, the back door opened, and a staggering figure got out. Megan quickly opened the front door, and the streetlight revealed Ryan leaning against the taxi, paying the driver with uncoordinated movements. When the taxi drove off and he turned toward the house, Megan saw the state he was in. His shirt was disheveled, torn at one shoulder. There was a shallow cut above his right eyebrow, and his face was marked by something that looked a lot like barely contained terror. Ryan stumbled up the front steps, and when he finally stood face to face with Megan, the first words out of his mouth made her world stop spinning completely. "Megan, we have to get out of here. Now, tonight. Our lives depend on it." Megan stood frozen in the doorway, her brain trying to process those absurd words as she watched Ryan lean against the doorframe, breathing heavily. "Get out? Now? What are you talking about?" she managed to articulate, though her voice sounded distant even to her own ears. Ryan stumbled inside, slamming the door behind him with more force than necessary and quickly locking it. His fingers trembled as he engaged the deadbolt, and then he rushed to the window, peering through the curtains at the dark street outside. "We don't have time for long explanations right now," he said, turning to face her. The hallway light illuminated the cut on his face, also revealing bruises that were starting to form on his neck. "Someone found me, someone from my past, and they know where we live." The terror in his voice was real, palpable, and Megan felt her own fear begin to match his, even without fully understanding what was happening. Who found you?" Ryan ran a hand through his hair, making it even more disheveled. "People from when I was Michael. People I thought I left behind 15 years ago." He approached her, grabbing her arms with urgency. "Megan, I know you have questions. I know I deserve every accusation you want to make. But right now, in this moment, I need you to trust me. Just grab the essentials, things for you and the baby, and let's get out of this house. We can go to a hotel, to your mum's, anywhere but here. Please." The plea in his eyes was genuine, but Megan pulled away sharply, anger finally overpowering. Her fear. "Trust you?" she practically screamed, all the day's repressed emotions exploding at once. "You want me to trust you when you've spent our entire life together lying about who you really are, when you built our relationship on a fake identity?" Ryan flinched as if he'd been slapped. "You know," he whispered, "and it wasn't a question." Megan crossed her arms over her belly, protecting it instinctively. "My mom found out. She told me everything today. Michael Turner from Houston, the orphanage, the adoption, the scandal, the 5 years you were missing. Everything." She spat out each word, like an accusation. "And now you show up here in the middle of the night, hurt and terrified, telling me we're in danger, and you expect me to just obey without question." Ryan closed his eyes for a moment, the weight of all his secrets finally crashing down on him. When he opened them again, there was a resignation there, mixed with a fierce determination. "You're right. You deserve to know everything. But please, can we get out of here while I explain? In the car, on the way to somewhere safe. Every minute we spend here is another minute of risk." Megan hesitated, looking at this man she still loved despite everything, but who now seemed like a stranger. The cut on his face was still bleeding slightly, staining the collar of his shirt. He was genuinely afraid. She could see it in the tense lines of his body, in the way his eyes kept darting to the window, checking, always checking. Whatever had happened tonight had shaken Ryan to his core. "Okay," Megan finally agreed, making a decision she knew she might regret. "But you're going to tell me absolutely everything. No more lies, no more omissions." Ryan nodded vigorously. "Everything, I promise. Now please go pack a quick bag. Whatever you can grab in 5 minutes, I'll do the same." Megan went upstairs on trembling legs, entering their bedroom and grabbing a suitcase. Her hands operated on autopilot while her mind spun. She threw clothes into the bag without folding, grabbed toiletries from the bathroom, important documents from the dresser drawer. When she passed the nursery, she paused for a second, looking at the space prepared with so much love and hope, and a wave of sadness engulfed her. What kind of world was she bringing Julia into? What kind of mess had their lives become? She came downstairs a few minutes later with the bag, finding Ryan waiting at the door with his own luggage and an expression even more tense than before. "Did you see anything?" Megan asked, and he shook his head. "Not yet, but they'll come. I know they will. They made it very clear they know everything about me, about you, about our life here." Megan felt fear tighten in her stomach, but forced herself to stay calm for the baby's sake. "Where are we going?" Ryan was already opening the door, checking the street one more time before stepping out. "Your mom's first. Then we'll figure out the next step." He took the bags, and Megan followed him to the car parked in the garage. The night was muggy, the air thick with New Orleans' characteristic humidity, and every shadow seemed to hold an unseen threat. In the car, with the doors locked and the engine running, Megan could finally breathe a little easier. Ryan drove fast but with control, constantly checking the rearview mirror. Megan called Teresa, who answered sleepily, but was instantly alert upon hearing her daughter's voice. "Mom, Ryan and I are on our way to your place. It's urgent." Teresa didn't ask questions, just said she would get the guest room ready and wait for them. When Megan hung up, she turned to Ryan, the streetlights illuminating his tense profile as he drove. "Now, start talking. Everything." Ryan took a deep breath, and when he began, it was as if a dam had broken, releasing years of pent-up secrets. "You're right about the orphanage and the adoption," he started, keeping his eyes on the road. "But your mom didn't find out everything. She couldn't because not all the records exist anymore. When I was 12 and adopted by the Turners, I thought I had finally found a real family. They were good to me, gave me everything a kid could want. But at 16, when the financial scandal hit, I found out not everything was as it seemed. My adoptive father, Arthur Turner, was involved in something much bigger than simple corporate fraud. He worked for powerful people, people who used the export company as a front for illegal operations." Megan felt her blood run cold. What kind of operations? Ryan hesitated, and when he answered, his voice was heavy with old shame. "Money laundering mostly, but also facilitating fake documents, moving things across borders that shouldn't be moved. Arthur wasn't the boss, he was just a piece. But when the authorities started investigating, he panicked. He tried to make a deal, threatened to expose the real owners of the scheme. And then everything fell apart. The family broke up, he and my adoptive mother separated, and I was stuck in the middle of that hell." Megan was listening, fascinated and horrified. "But that doesn't explain why you changed your identity. Why not just get on with your life as Michael after things calmed down?" Ryan swerved to avoid a pothole, and Megan braced herself against the dashboard. "Because," he continued, his voice tight, "the people Arthur worked for didn't forgive his betrayal. They made his life very difficult after that. Arthur lost everything, went to jail for a while, came out financially and spiritually broken, and they made it clear that anyone associated with him was a target, including the teenage adopted son who knew too much." Megan swallowed hard. "You were threatened?" Ryan nodded grimly. "I got warnings, intimidation, things that made a 16-year-old kid terrified. So when I turned 18, I managed to legally change my name with the help of a lawyer Arthur knew. I became Ryan Scott and disappeared." "The 5-year gap," Megan said, connecting the dots. "The 5 years you were gone?" Ryan confirmed with a nod. "I worked in places where nobody asks questions. Construction, bars, anything that paid cash and didn't require strict documentation. I lived in small towns, moving constantly, always looking over my shoulder. I saved every penny I made, and when I finally felt like enough time had passed, that the powerful people had forgotten about me, I used the money to pay for a private college. I created a clean resume, a new story, and completely reinvented myself. I came to New Orleans because it was far from Houston, but still in the South, where I knew the region. I started the business, built a respectable life, and then I met you. and for the first time in years I felt like I had truly managed to leave Michael Turner behind. Megan was processing it all, trying to separate the compassion she felt for his traumatic story from the anger over the continuous lie. "You should have told me," she said softly. "When we started getting serious, when we decided to get married, I would have understood." Ryan laughed bitterly. "You think so? How would I explain that I wasn't who my ID said I was, that I had a past that included connections to criminals, even if unwillingly, that I lived in fear of being found? I didn't want to drag you into this, Megan. I really thought I had escaped. 15 years with no incidents. I thought I was safe, that we would be safe, but I was wrong." "What happened? Tonight?" Megan asked. "Who found you and what do they want?" Ryan gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. "The meeting I said I had was a lie. I actually got an anonymous text asking me to meet someone at an abandoned warehouse near the port. I knew it was risky, but the message mentioned my real name, Michael, so I went, because I had to know who was after me and what they wanted." Megan's heart clenched. "There were 2 men there," he continued. "They worked for the same organization Arthur had betrayed years ago. They said there had been a recent change in leadership, and the new boss is cleaning up old loose ends. They wanted to know how much I knew about the old operations, if Arthur had told me anything that could be used against them." "And did you tell them?" "There was nothing to tell," Ryan answered, frustrated. "I was just a kid. I never knew details, was never directly involved. But they didn't believe me. They thought I was hiding information, that maybe I had documents or proof Arthur passed on to me. They got aggressive." Ryan touched the cut on his face. "I tried to leave. They tried to stop me. I barely managed to escape, caught a passing taxi and came straight home. But they know our address, Megan. They must have followed me before. They know everything about our life here. And they made it clear that if I don't cooperate, if I don't find something they think I have, they'll make our lives a living hell." Megan placed her hands on her belly, feeling Julia move restlessly, as if sensing her mother's tension. "So we're running? Is that the solution? Running away again like you did when you were a teenager?" Ryan shook his head. "No, not this time. This time I'm going to the police. I'm going to tell them everything, offer to cooperate, ask for protection. I should have done this years ago. Fear made me a coward, made me hide instead of facing it. But now it's not just about me, it's about you, about our daughter. I won't let my past destroy her future." Megan felt hot tears stream down her face. "Why didn't you tell me any of this before? We could have faced it together." Ryan reached out, taking her hand. "I know I was stupid, selfish, and a coward. I thought I was protecting you, but I was really just protecting myself from judgment, from the possibility of losing you. But now you know everything, and I'll understand if you can't forgive me." They drove in silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own turbulent thoughts. New Orleans passed by the windows, the city asleep under a cloud-covered sky that blocked the stars. Megan stared at the urban landscape without really seeing it, her mind racing in circles. Part of her wanted to scream at Ryan to expel all the anger and sense of betrayal simmering inside her. Another part, the part that still loved him despite everything, understood the terror that had guided his decisions, the desperate need of a traumatized teenager to reinvent himself and escape a past that haunted him. "You said you're going to the police," Megan finally said. "When?" Ryan was already turning onto Teresa's street. "First thing tomorrow morning. I'll tell them everything, give them every name I can remember, describe the men who confronted me tonight. I'll ask for protection for you and me while they investigate." They arrived at Teresa's house, a cozy one-story home in a quiet neighborhood. The lights were on, and Teresa was at the door before they even got out of the car. She ran to hug Megan, quickly checking her over to make sure she was okay, and then her eyes fixed on Ryan. The look she gave him was hard, full of silent accusation. Ryan endured the scrutiny without looking away. "Teresa," he said respectfully, "I know you have no reason to trust me right now. I know you found out about my past and probably think I'm the worst thing that could have happened to your daughter. And maybe you're right, but I swear on my daughter's life that I'm doing everything in my power to fix my mistakes and protect our family." Teresa didn't answer immediately, studying his face, the cut above his eyebrow, the marks on his neck. Finally, she gave a curt nod. "Get inside, we'll talk in there." The house was warm and smelled of freshly brewed coffee. Teresa led them to the living room, where Megan sat down heavily on the sofa, physically and emotionally exhausted. Ryan remained standing, restless, still compulsively checking the windows. Teresa brought a first aid kit and, without asking permission, began cleaning the cut on Ryan's face. He let her tend to him silently, and Megan watched the scene with a complex mix of emotions. Her mother, caring for the man who had lied to her, but who was also the father of her child, the man who, despite all his mistakes, she still loved in a confused and painful way. After Ryan told Teresa the same story, adding details he had omitted in the car, the three of them sat in the heavy silence of the early morning. Teresa was the first to speak. "So tomorrow you go to the police, and then what? How does that protect my daughter and my granddaughter?" Ryan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "If I cooperate, if I give them useful information, they can offer witness protection. It might mean moving again, living under supervision for a while. It won't be easy, but it will be safer than being exposed like this." Megan placed her hand on his. She corrected softly. "It will be safer for us. If you're going to face this, we're going to face it together." Ryan looked at her, with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Even after everything I've done, all the lies," Megan sighed deeply. "I'm not going to pretend this hasn't changed everything between us. It has. You broke my trust in a way that will take a very long time to rebuild, if it's even possible. But," she placed a hand on her belly, "we have a daughter coming in 2 months, and despite everything, I still see the man who made me laugh, who supported me in my darkest moments, who assembled that nursery with so much care. That man is real too, Ryan. So yes, we'll face this together, but no more lies, never again." Ryan nodded, tears shining in his eyes. "Never again. I promise." Teresa watched the exchange with an unreadable expression, but finally sighed. "All right. Tomorrow we all go to the police together. But for tonight you need to rest, especially you, Megan. This stress isn't good for the baby." Teresa led them to the guest room, a simple but comfortable space with a double bed and walls decorated with old family photos. Megan lay down first, feeling the weight of the day crash down on her all at once. Ryan lay down beside her, keeping a respectful distance, but Megan took his hand under the covers. They stayed like that for a long time, holding hands in the dark, neither of them able to sleep despite their exhaustion. "Megan," Ryan finally whispered, "if something happens to me, if things get really bad, promise me you'll take care of yourself and Julia, that you'll move on." "Nothing is going to happen to you," Megan answered firmly. "We're going to solve this together, and then we're going to build the life our daughter deserves, a life based on truth." But even as she said it, even as she tried to believe her own words, Megan couldn't completely shake the fear that had taken root in her heart. The future, which just days ago had seemed so clear and full of promise, was now a fog of uncertainty. Everything depended on what would happen in the next few hours, on what the police would decide to do, on how deep the connections of the people after Ryan ran. She closed her eyes, trying to find comfort in her husband's presence beside her, in the gentle movement of the baby inside her, in the temporary safety of her mother's house. And as she finally began to drift into a restless sleep, her last conscious thought was a silent prayer that, somehow, everything would turn out okay in the end. The morning arrived grey and heavy, with dark clouds promising imminent rain. Megan woke up with an aching back and a sense of unreality, as if the previous night's events had been just a particularly vivid nightmare. But then she turned her head and saw Ryan already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with his phone in his hands, his expression tense and focused. Reality came back like a punch to the gut. They really were hiding in her mother's house, running from dangerous people from Ryan's past, preparing to go to the police and entrust their lives to the authorities. "What time is it?" Megan asked, her voice hoarse from sleep. 6:30, Ryan replied without looking at her. "I'm trying to gather all the information I can remember, names, dates, anything that might help the police." Megan got up with difficulty, the weight of her pregnancy making every movement a challenge. She went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, trying to wake up completely, and when she returned to the room, Ryan finally looked at her. "Did you get any sleep?" he asked, and Megan could see the genuine concern in his eyes despite everything. "A little. You?" "Not much. I spent most of the night going over everything in my head, trying to prepare what I'm going to say today." Megan sat beside him on the bed. "It's going to be okay," she said, trying to sound more confident than she really felt. "We have to believe that." Ryan took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "After everything I did, all the lies, you're still here." Megan squeezed his hand back. "It's not about deserving. It's about choosing to stay, choosing to fight for what we built together, even if the foundations have been shaken." A smell of coffee and fresh bread wafted down the hall, and they went downstairs to find Teresa already in the kitchen making breakfast. The table was set meticulously, as if it were just another ordinary day, but the tension was palpable in the air. Teresa served coffee, scrambled eggs and grits, insisting that Megan eat well. "You need to keep your strength up," she said, her maternal tone allowing no argument. "Are you planning to leave for the police station early?" Ryan nodded. "The sooner the better. Every hour that passes is another hour of risk." Teresa sat with them, holding her own coffee cup but not drinking. "I'm going with you," she declared. "It's non-negotiable. You'll need support, and I want to hear firsthand what the police are going to do to protect my daughter and my granddaughter." At 8 o'clock sharp, the three of them were in the car on their way to the New Orleans Police Department headquarters. Ryan drove in silence, constantly checking the rearview mirror out of habit. Megan was in the passenger seat, one protective hand on her belly, feeling Julia move inside her. The little one seemed more active than usual, as if she too sensed the tension in the air. Teresa was in the back seat, equally silent, her eyes watching everything with the sharp attention of a protective mother. The police station was a grey, imposing building in the center of the city, with a constant flow of people coming and going. When they parked, Ryan took several deep breaths before turning off the engine. "This is the point of no return," he said. "Once I tell them everything, there's no going back." "Then let's go," Megan encouraged. Inside the station, the air conditioning was too strong, making Megan shiver despite the heat outside. Ryan approached the front desk and asked to speak with a detective about a serious matter related to organized crime and a possible need for protection. The desk officer, a middle-aged woman with a tired expression, looked at them with initial skepticism, but something in the urgency of Ryan's tone made her pick up the phone and make a quick call. Minutes later, a tall man in a suit entered the lobby. "Detective Henry Carter," he introduced himself, shaking Ryan's hand. "Come with me." They were led to a Spartan interrogation room with just a metal table and a few uncomfortable chairs. The detective sat on one side and the three of them on the other, with Ryan in the middle. Ryan began to speak, and once he started, it was as if he couldn't stop. He told them everything from the beginning. His life as Michael Turner in the orphanage, his adoption by the Turner family, his adoptive father's involvement in money laundering schemes and other illegal activities, his discovery of these crimes, and the subsequent collapse of the family. He explained how he changed his identity to escape threats from people associated with Arthur's criminal operations, the 5 years he spent underground working odd jobs, and finally his reinvention as Ryan Scott. Detective Carter listened intently, making occasional notes, his expression remaining neutral and professional. When Ryan got to the part about the meeting in the warehouse the previous night, Carter leaned forward, interested. "Can you describe these men?" Ryan described them in detail, their approximate height, facial features, accents, even the clothes they were wearing. Carter continued to take notes, and then he asked a question that made Megan's heart stop. "And you're sure these people work for the same organization your adoptive father was associated with 15 years ago? How can you be sure?" Ryan hesitated for just a second. One of the men mentioned a specific name, a nickname Arthur used to use when he was on the phone with his contacts. "The Catfish." That's what they called the head of the operation back then. "And this man yesterday said that the Catfish wanted to talk to me. that he had pending issues from Arthur's time. Carter abruptly stopped writing, his face showing surprise for the first time. The catfish. You're sure that's the name they used? Ryan nodded, confused by the detective's reaction. Absolutely. Why? Is that someone you know? Carter leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his face with a weary gesture. Michael Turner, or Ryan Scott. You've just mentioned a name we've been investigating for 3 years. The catfish is one of the biggest operators of illegal financial schemes in the South. We've never been able to positively identify him. He always works through intermediaries, never leaves a direct trail. If he's really interested in you, it means one of two things. Either he thinks you're a real threat, or he thinks you have valuable information. Ryan exchanged a worried look with Megan. But I don't have anything. I was just a kid when Arthur worked for him. I don't know anything useful. Carter stood up, beginning to pace the small room. Maybe you know more than you think. Memories of conversations you overheard, documents you might have seen, names Arthur mentioned. Sometimes details that seem insignificant to you can be the missing piece of a larger puzzle. He stopped, looking directly at Ryan. I'll be honest. If you're truly willing to cooperate with our investigation, this could be extremely valuable. But it also means you and your family will need serious protection. These people don't mess around. Megan felt a tightness in her chest. What kind of protection? Carter sat back down. Official witness protection. Probably a temporary relocation while we build the case. Agents assigned to watch you. It's a complicated and invasive process, but it's necessary. Teresa, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. And what if they decide they don't want to go through that? If they just want to get on with their lives in peace? Carter shook his head sadly. With all due respect, ma'am, that option no longer exists. If the catfish really sent his men after Ryan, he's not just going to give up. These people are persistent and patient. The best chance for your daughter and grandchild to have a safe life is to cooperate with us. Help us dismantle this organization once and for all. Ryan took Megan's hand across the table. This is your decision too. What do you think? Megan looked at her husband, then at her mother, and finally at the detective. She felt the baby kick inside her, a powerful reminder of the future they wanted to build. We'll do whatever it takes to keep our family safe. The next few hours were a blur of paperwork, formal statements, and meetings with other investigators. Carter brought in 2 more members of his team, experts in organized crime, and they questioned Ryan exhaustively about every detail he could remember from his time with the Turner family. Megan was impressed by how much Ryan actually recalled. Small details from phone conversations Arthur had, names of cities that were frequently mentioned, even physical descriptions of people who visited the house during those years. The investigators recorded everything, having Ryan repeat certain parts, clarifying dates and sequences of events. Around 2 in the afternoon, when they finally took a break, Megan was exhausted and hungry. Teresa had gone to get lunch from a nearby restaurant, and the 3 of them ate in silence in a waiting room. Ryan, after finishing his food, turned to Megan with a serious expression. There's something the investigators asked me to do that might be difficult. They want me to try to contact Arthur, my adoptive father, to see if he'd be willing to testify too, add his perspective to the case. Megan swallowed hard. Have you spoken to him at all in the last 15 years? Ryan shook his head. Not a single time since I changed my name. He made it very clear he considered me a traitor for not standing by him during the scandal, for changing my identity and disappearing. But Carter thinks that knowing I'm willing to face this, Arthur might reconsider. He's old now, living in poor conditions. Maybe he wants a chance at redemption, a chance to help bring down the people who destroyed his life too. Do you want to do that? Megan asked softly. To see the man who was your father for 4 years after all this time? Ryan sighed deeply. I don't know if I want to, but it needs to be done. For us. For Julia. If Arthur can help build a stronger case, if it means we'll be safe sooner, then it's worth a try. Teresa placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder, a surprising gesture of support from her. Then we'll go together. You don't have to face this alone. The rest of the afternoon was spent tracking down Arthur Turner. The investigators already had an approximate address in Houston, and after a few calls, they confirmed he still lived there. Carter arranged for a local team to make initial contact, explaining the situation and asking if Arthur would be willing to speak with Ryan. The answer came faster than they expected. Arthur said he would talk to Ryan, but only if it was in person, face to face. He didn't trust phones or video calls, certain he had been watched for years. Carter organized a trip to Houston for the next day with full police protection. Ryan, Megan, and Teresa would stay in a secure hotel, and the meeting with Arthur would take place in a controlled location. That night, back at Teresa's house and under discreet police surveillance, the three of them sat in the living room trying to process everything that had happened. Megan was lying on the sofa, her head in her mother's lap, as Teresa stroked her hair like she did when Megan was a child. Ryan sat in a nearby armchair, staring out the window at the street where an unmarked police car was parked. "Are you scared?" Megan asked Ryan. "Of seeing Arthur again after all this time?" Ryan turned to look at her. "Terrified. He was my father for 4 formative years of my life. Even after everything that happened, part of me still feels that connection, that desire for approval. I don't know how I'll react when I see him again, old and broken by the life he chose." Megan held out her hand, and Ryan crossed the room to take it. "Whatever you feel, it's valid. You're doing the right thing now, and that's what matters." Teresa agreed. "And don't forget, Ryan, that regardless of what Arthur was to you in the past, you have your own family now. A family that supports you and will be by your side every step of this journey." The flight to Houston the next morning was quiet and tense. They were accompanied by 2 federal agents Carter had assigned for their protection. At the Houston airport, they were met by more agents and escorted to a hotel in the city center. The meeting with Arthur was scheduled for that afternoon in a conference room at the local federal building. As Ryan prepared, adjusting his shirt for the 10th time and trying to calm his nerves, Megan held him by the shoulders. "Look at me. You are Ryan Scott, a good man who has built an honest life and is going to be a wonderful father. The scared boy who was Michael is gone. You've grown, overcome trauma, and now you're facing your past with courage. I'm proud of you." Her words seemed to calm him a little, and with a quick kiss on Megan's forehead he left with the agents. Megan and Teresa waited in the hotel, the hours dragging by with agonizing slowness. Megan tried to distract herself by watching TV, but her mind was with Ryan, imagining the emotional reunion happening just a few miles away. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the hotel room door opened and Ryan walked in. He looked emotionally drained, his eyes red as if he had been crying, but there was also a lightness to his shoulders that hadn't been there before. He went to Megan and hugged her tightly, burying his face in her hair. "How did it go?" she asked softly. Ryan pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "It was hard. He's so different, so old and broken. But it was also liberating. We talked about everything. His mistakes, my fear, the lives we've each led these past 15 years. And he apologized. He truly apologized for putting me in that situation, for not protecting me when he should have." "And will he testify?" Teresa asked from across the room. Ryan nodded. "Yes. He said he's tired of living in fear, tired of protecting people who destroyed his life. He wants to do the right thing before it's too late. His information, combined with what I remember, could be crucial for the case." Carter was in the meeting and was impressed with the level of detail Arthur provided. He says that with this information, they can finally build a solid case against the catfish and his organization. The following weeks were an emotional roller coaster. Ryan and Megan returned to New Orleans, but not to their home, which was deemed unsafe. Instead, they stayed in a safe house provided by the Witness Protection Program, a modest but comfortable apartment in a different part of the city. Teresa visited daily, always escorted and vetted by security agents. Ryan spent hours in meetings with investigators, building the case brick by brick. Megan attended some of these meetings when relevant, but mostly focused on preparing for Julia's arrival, which was now just weeks away. The situation was surreal, setting up a temporary nursery in a safe house, shopping for the baby, always accompanied by agents, living in a constant state of vigilance and anxiety. But through it all, something unexpected was happening. Ryan and Megan were reconnecting in a deeper way than before, with no more secrets between them, no more lies poisoning every interaction. They could finally be completely honest with each other. They talked for hours about their fears, their hopes, about how they wanted to raise Julia, about the kind of parents they aspired to be. And despite the difficult circumstances, or perhaps because of them, the love between them grew stronger. A month after Ryan's collaboration with the authorities began, Carter summoned them for an urgent meeting. When they arrived at the station, they found the detective with an expression Megan couldn't decipher. It was somewhere between satisfaction and concern. "We have news," he began without preamble. "Based on your and Arthur's information, we were able to execute a coordinated operation this morning. We arrested 17 people, including several key operators in the organization." Megan's heart raced. "And the catfish?" Carter sighed. "That's the complicated part. When we got to the location where we believed he would be, we found the place empty. Someone tipped him off, and he managed to escape. But here's the good news. Without his support network, without his main operators, he's extremely weakened. And we have active arrest warrants out for him. It's only a matter of time until we find him." Ryan leaned forward, the tension visible in every line of his body. "So we're still in danger, as long as he's free?" Carter pondered before answering. "The risk has significantly decreased. He's on the run now, worried about his own survival, not revenge. But yes, until he's captured, you must remain in protection." Megan squeezed Ryan's hand. "How long do you think it will take?" Carter shrugged. "Days, weeks, maybe months. But we'll get him. We always do." The weeks turned into months, but life in protection gradually took on a routine of its own. And then, on a warm, February morning, Megan woke up with contractions. It was time. The baby was coming. Ryan panicked in an almost comical way, running around the safe house looking for the hospital bag that was packed and sitting obviously by the door. The security agents organized a swift convoy to the hospital, and hours later, in a delivery room under unusual but discreet surveillance, Julia Scott came into the world. She was perfect. Tiny, with a surprising amount of dark hair and powerful lungs that announced her arrival to the entire maternity ward. Ryan held his daughter for the first time, with trembling hands, tears streaming freely down his face, all the anxieties and fears of the past weeks momentarily forgotten in the face of this tiny miracle. Megan, exhausted but radiant, watched father and daughter with a love so intense it was physically painful. Teresa arrived minutes later, escorted by more agents, and when she saw her granddaughter for the first time, she broke down in sobs of joy. Even surrounded by extraordinary circumstances, surrounded by guards and living under protection, that moment was pure and beautiful. Julia was theirs, a new beginning, a promise of a future that no external threat could completely tarnish. 2 weeks later, when Megan and Julia were discharged from the hospital and returned to the safe house, Carter showed up with the news they had been waiting for months. "We got him. The catfish was captured on the border with Mexico trying to flee the country. He's in custody now, and with the charges we have, he'll spend the rest of his life in prison. The threat is over." Megan felt her knees go weak with relief, and Ryan held her, the two of them embracing with Julia between them, finally allowing themselves to feel the security they had chased for so long. "It's over," Ryan whispered into Megan's hair. "It's really over." "Can we go home?" Megan asked Carter. "Can we start our real life?" Carter smiled, the first genuine smile Megan had seen on him in all those months. "Yes, but I'd suggest you don't go back to the old house. Too much trauma associated with it. Start fresh, a new place, a blank slate." And that's exactly what they did. In the following months, Ryan and Megan bought a new house in a family-friendly neighborhood in New Orleans, far from the memories and threats of their previous life. They furnished each room with care, creating a perfect nursery for Julia where every detail was chosen with love. Teresa became a constant presence, the devoted grandmother who showed up almost daily to help with the baby and share family meals. Ryan expanded his business, finally able to focus without the constant weight of fear. And Megan, after some time adjusting to motherhood, went back to work part-time, finding a balance that worked for her new family. It wasn't perfect. There were nights when Megan woke up from nightmares, reliving the most terrifying moments of those difficult months. There were times when Ryan saw a strange shadow, and his body automatically went on high alert, the trauma of the past never completely erased. And there were difficult conversations about trust and honesty that continued to happen, each one slowly rebuilding the foundation of their relationship on more solid ground this time. But there was also joy. The first time Julia smiled at them, her first wobbly steps across the new backyard. Sunday afternoons with Teresa, making gumbo and watching Julia play. The stolen moments between Ryan and Megan after Julia was asleep, reconnecting physically and emotionally, rediscovering each other without the barriers of secrets and fears. A year after it all began, on Julia's first birthday, they threw a party in the backyard of their new home. Teresa helped decorate with pink and yellow balloons, and friends who had supported the family through the tough times came to celebrate. Carter even made a brief appearance with his wife, checking in on the family he had helped protect and clearly pleased to see them thriving. When the party was in full swing, Ryan asked for everyone's attention, raising a glass of juice, as Megan was pregnant again, this time with a boy they planned to name Peter. "I want to thank everyone who is here today," Ryan began, his voice emotional. "This past year has been the hardest and most transformative of my life. I learned that secrets always come to light, that the past always catches up with us one way or another, but I also learned that with the right people by your side, you can weather any storm." He looked at Megan, who was holding Julia in her lap, the little girl playing with her mother's necklace. "Megan, you gave me something I never truly had before. A family, a future, a reason to be honest and brave, and Teresa." He turned to his mother-in-law, who was discreetly wiping away tears. "Thank you for never giving up on me, even when you had every reason to. You all taught me that redemption is possible, that we can rebuild ourselves after our mistakes, that love really does conquer all when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable." To Julia, our little girl who was born in the midst of chaos but brought so much light, and to Peter, who is on his way, I promise to be the father you deserve. A real man with no masks, no secrets, just me with all my flaws and all my determination to do the right thing. Everyone applauded, and Megan felt tears of happiness stream down her face. She kissed Julia's little head and looked around at all the dear faces, at the flowering garden, at the house that represented a new beginning and hope. It had been a painful, frightening journey that had tested every limit of her strength and resilience. But looking back now, she could see how every trial had shaped who they were as a couple, as a family. The foundations of their love had been broken and rebuilt, and now they were stronger than ever, built not on illusions but on truth, not on convenience, but on the conscious choice to fight for each other day after day. That night, after everyone had gone home and Julia was asleep in her crib, Ryan and Megan sat on the porch swing, looking at the stars that were finally visible through a break in the clouds. "Do you think we'll ever be able to tell this story to Julia and Peter?" Megan asked. "About everything we went through?" Ryan pulled her closer. "I think so. When they're older, when they can understand. We'll tell them how their parents almost gave up but chose to fight, how they faced fear and danger but came out stronger. It will be a lesson about the importance of truth, courage, and forgiveness." Megan nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. "And about love, about how real love isn't perfect or easy, but it's persistent. It's choosing the person every single day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." They stayed there for a long time, lulled by the gentle motion of the swing and the chorus of cicadas singing in the Louisiana night. The future stretched out before them, still uncertain in many ways, but now full of possibilities that once seemed impossible. They had made it. They had weathered the storm and come out on the other side, scarred but whole, scared but hopeful, and above all, together. And as a soft breeze rustled the flowers in the garden, carrying the sweet scent of jasmine and promises, Megan closed her eyes and finally, completely, allowed herself to believe that everything really would be okay. That this life they had built together, based now on hard-won honesty and trust, was real and lasting. That their love, tested by fire and proven true, would be enough to face whatever challenges the future held. And that Julia and Peter would grow up in a home filled not with secrets and lies, but with truth, courage, and an unbreakable love.